Happy Monday, everybody. You're listening to the Personal Playlist Podcast, fondly referred to as the P3 on Voice Ed Radio. I'm Noah Daniel.
Music is a world within itself, with a language we all understand.
I am so excited to have Eric Alper here on the Personal Playlist Podcast. Eric started his own PR firm, Eric Alper Public Relations, after being the Director of Media Relations and Labor Relations for eOne Music Canada for the past 18 years. He's a regular music industry contributor to Bell Media, Rogers, Shaw Media, among others, and Eric is the host of At That Eric Alper Show on SiriusXM, a one-hour talk show about music. With over 1 million followers on social media, he's been named to Billboard Magazine, Pace Magazine, and National Post Best on social media. But Eric also goes to schools as a music industry expert to talk about how to find your spark. Welcome to the show, Eric.
Hey, thanks for having me, Noah. That's a great introduction. Well, that's all the time we have now.
Eric, this is so exciting because I've known you for so long, really like as Candace's husband and as Hannah's dad, and Stephen Hurley, my producer, has never done this. He called me and he's like, you know Eric Alper, you need to get him on your show. And I was like, well, Stephen, he's awesome and he's into music, but I couldn't see the educational connection until you started telling me more about what you were doing. And I would love to know how you started going into schools to talk about this.
Yeah, working in the music industry, and really, I think it's any industry that you land in that you fight to keep your place there. And I mean, look, make no mistake, I know I'm very, very lucky to be able to do what I do for so long. I knew what I wanted to do in the music industry since the time I was probably 9 or 10 years old.
What do you mean you knew that at 9 or 10?
I knew I had a subscription to Billboard magazine when I was 12, but I always saw, whenever I was reading Billboard magazine, not only was I like looking at the chart and memorizing the writers and memorizing the songs and the record labels, but it was the stories of the people behind it. It was the stories of the songs that thrilled me because I was learning about the world around me through music. I was learning about, if you give me any song, it's like I can tell you what the economic situation was, what society was like, politics-wise, what was happening. There's a lot within those grooves that can tell me a lot about what was going on in the world. And I love that because then I realized early on that music isn't really about music. It's really about the connection that the artist makes to the fan, and that the fan has the ability to emotionally attach themselves to their song. So when I talk to artists about, hey, did you know that song was going to be a hit or that song? They were like, no. Like I was writing that song to my wife. And it just so happened that 40 million people around the world thought that about their wives or husbands as well. Going back now to the music side and to the educational side, I learned that once I wanted to do what I wanted to do and I was surviving in it and keep going, I kept getting calls to speak at universities and music schools across the country and doing music conferences, not just about PR and how anybody can do PR, whether you're a podcaster or a small business or a record label, but it was really how to find your spark and how to follow your dreams, because not everybody can be Mick Jagger of the Rolling Stones. A lot of times, only 1/10 of 1/10 of 100% of the people actually make money in this industry. The rest of it, by the time they're 30, they've kind of left those dreams aside. So what I try to do is let people know that there are other options for them working specifically in music. That's not about being on stage in front of 50,000 people.
So everybody dreams of being a rock star, and you come in and you say you might not be a rock star. How do you help couch that reality for them?
Well, after they swear at me and they say, yes, I will, and I'm like, that's exactly the attitude that you need. Because their whole lives, they're going to be told, no, there's too much guitar in that song. There's too much drum. The song is too long. The song is too short. You don't look good. You're too young. You're too old. There are 1,000 different reasons why somebody doesn't want to give you the opportunity. And one reason why they do, and it's because you're great, because nobody has time for good anymore. So what I try to tell them is all of the different opportunities and options out there. whether it's playing at, a little local bar as a form of entertainment, or wedding or bar mitzvah singers and entertainment, to working at nonprofit groups who always need artists and musicians for their benefit concerts or fundraising initiatives, to working for nonprofit groups and associations within the music industry, to working at a record label, to being a producer or an engineer, or even owning a studio and let other people handle that. I can't play a note of music. I suck at everything. I have no musical talent whatsoever, and everybody around my life will completely vouch for it. But for some reason, I've just developed this knack to figuring out what the media is looking for as a publicist, and also talking in the language of artists to know that it's not going to happen overnight, and just to kind of give them enough information to arm themselves with making the right decisions for their career.
I think that happens too. There are only a few professions that we're actually aware of. And it's so nice that people not only, tease out some of the realities of those professions or those industries, but give us options and tell us that we can still do what we love. It just might be a little bit of a tweak on what that original vision was.
Yeah, because, you grew up and very few people actually want to be an engineer in a recording studio or being a producer. Most of the producers they're not failed musicians, Daniel Lenoir, who is probably listening. But most of the producers just have a knack not only on the music side, but like they're kind of psychiatrists, because they have to listen to potentially 4 spoiled brats in the studio racking up hundreds of thousands of dollars that don't want to listen to anybody except for themselves. And so the producer's job is to kind of, get that goal of what the band and what the manager and the record label wants, and kind of make sure that happens. But at the same time, they're like a sounding board, they're a pillow, they're a couch, they're all these different things. And sometimes that stuff is more important than, knowing what all the knobs are or how to make certain sounds. Because a lot of the times people are just kind of guessing whatever they're doing. So a lot of the times for me, it's a matter of finding out what people's dreams are or what they do want to achieve. Because in the music industry, it's not always I want to play in front of, at Madison Square Garden. Sometimes it's like I want my songs in films or television, or I think that I want to tour the world, but my music is folk or roots or blues, and that's stuff that's not really on commercial radio. So it's a matter of figuring out what their goal is, and then kind of working backwards and taking those small steps, and kind of teaching them that it's okay to fail. Like, they're going to fail. They're going to suck really badly on doing it. And they should fail 1,000 times. I can't tell you and other artists, just, you hear the final version of a great song, but you don't see the 500 different versions that it took to get there. The Rolling Stones used to, even before they put a song on the album, they used to go through how is the song as a fast song, as a ballad, as a waltz, as a punk attitude song, as a disco song, and all these different versions of it in order to find the one that fit for them. And that attitude, even though that people may go, oh, I'm not a fan of the Rolling Stones, or I can't play the Rolling Stones, it doesn't matter. The lesson is still the same, that you have to try, and you have to keep going, and you have to keep trying different things and failing in order to make those dreams possible.
It's so much a part of what we're doing in the classroom today is actually spending time teaching about failure and growth mindset and what it means to pick yourself up. But also I was thinking about the whole writing process, and the beauty behind music is very similar to anytime you have a masterpiece of any kind, and we don't see all of the details and the editing and revision that goes on in that. And we think, oh, well, I want to do that. And that has a lot to do with all those other layers. But I want to come back to your point of connection, because really that's what this show is. It came from the idea of connecting to my students in a unique way. And it evolved to become this show that I also get to do as a project in my classroom. So I asked you to bring me 3 songs, one that's nostalgic, one that reflects your identity, and then one that picks you up, lifts you up, inspires, or motivates. And originally we were scheduled to do this earlier, and you sent me 3 songs. And then when we rescheduled, you sent me 3 new songs. So tell me a little bit about your process.
It all depends on how I'm feeling. It's so funny. I've got like 1.5 million songs on my computer, but then when somebody says to me, so who's your favorite artist? I go blank. It's like every song that's ever written in the history of the world. So a lot of the times it's about how I'm feeling and what I'm personally going through as well. You know, and you brought it up. It's like, you know, you don't have to be a musician to kind of learn from somebody like me or somebody like you. Even if you're a teacher, you know that you just can't walk into a classroom and have those lessons nailed. Public speaking, memorizing, being comfortable with the students and not feeling what you're feeling inside. All of that is practice. All of that is continuing to hone in on what you love. So my 3 songs are kind of practice for me for figuring out what the final answer is going to be. But I think like music, it changes from day to day. I mean, if we didn't get to talk today and you asked me to send 3 songs tomorrow, I'm not so sure that I would give you the same 3 songs. We'll talk about these ones though.
Well, that's the other cool part of this. It's not, you know, it's not a forever. This is a moment that we get to share together and that other people are going to listen to and get to know a little bit about you.
5 years down the road, because I'm going to have completely different songs. So when you come up to me and go, dude, why did you choose Wham? I'm always going to choose Wham.
That's very funny. But we're not starting with Wham because we're going back. We're going to go for a throwback to your nostalgic song. And you chose this song, this very classic, cool song about a really interesting guy. Why this song of all the songs in all the land?
I chose Great Balls of Fire by Jerry Lee Lewis because this was the first single I ever bought with my own money. My parents used to buy me all the records I wanted, and that contained Donny Osmond and Donnie and Marie and the Jackson 5. But this was the record that I heard on the radio as a 6-year-old listening to hit radio. Because back then you would hear Jerry Lee Lewis and the Beatles and ABBA and disco. Whatever was a hit, these radio stations would play it no matter what style of music it was. Jerry Lee Lewis was the first one that kind of blew my mind that said, what is this? And when I first saw a photo of Jerry Lee Lewis with the blonde hair and the curly hair and watching a video of him stomping on the piano and standing on top of that piano and kicking the piano seat halfway around the room and just being a hell-raising sex god was something that I'd never seen before. I was just an innocent young lad watching Donnie and Marie and Carol Burnett and Hee Haw. And then this guy comes around. So this was the first song that I ever bought with my own money. And I had the pleasure of working with Jerry Lee Lewis for a couple of albums, including a gold record in Canada. And the first time I met him, he's the only person in my entire 25-year career that I was terrified to meet because I didn't know how he would be. His reputation. I mean, he's nicknamed the Killer for a reason.
So how was he in person?
He was amazing. When I first saw him on stage, he had bodyguards lined up in front of the stage, and I didn't quite know if that was to protect the audience from Jerry or Jerry from the audience. And it turned out to be a little bit of both. He was everything I thought he was. He called me Killer, was the sweetest guy in the world. And, he's still the last one standing out of all of it. Roy Orbison and Elvis and Buddy and John Lennon and just a true original that, I mean, this guy may never die.
Wow. Let's play it. Jerry Lee Lewis, Great Balls of Fire.
You shake my nerves and you rattle my brain. Too much love drives a man insane. You broke my will, but what a thrill. Goodness and gracious, great balls of fire. I like to look upon I thought it was funny. You came along and moved me, honey. I changed my mind. This love is fine. Goodness and gracious, great balls of fire. Kiss me, baby. Ooh, it feels good. Hold me, baby. I want to love you like a lover should. You're fine, so kind. I want to tell the world that you're mine, 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 mine. I chew my nails and I twiddle my thumbs. I'm real nervous, but it sure is fun. Oh, baby, drive me crazy. Goodness and gracious, great balls of fire.
It's amazing to go back to those days the TV shows that you used to watch, and Donnie and Marie. But I would think things would have been different in your house considering your grandfather owned Grossman's Tavern. So you must have had access to like cool music and bands.
Yeah, I did. And in fact, I think the biggest and the brightest memory I have of hanging out at Grossman's Tavern as a kid was just that sense of community. Because for people that may not know about the bar, it's situated right in the heart of Kensington Market in Toronto. And when the bar first opened in the mid 1940s, it was part of a community where you had a lot of Jewish families, you had a lot of immigrants moving to Kensington Market, and you lived upstairs in your house or in the building or the store, and you worked downstairs. So every time I went to Grossman's Tavern, not only did my cousins and my parents work there at any given time, but the people at the tavern loved music. But more importantly, they loved what music was able to do. It was that sense of community, that sense of belonging, that sense of drinking together and listening to music. It was a real bonding experience. And, going back to the whole, like, music has taught me about the world more than like a US history lesson or a Canadian history lesson. Being in venues like Grossman's Tavern really taught me a lot about community and giving back to the community, because all my grandfather wanted to do was just have a place for his family and friends to work and hang out in. And he was able to achieve that for now 75 years that the bar is still standing. Different owners, but they still have that sense of quality, and that they still have music 7 nights a week.
Yeah, that is a really amazing thing to be able to think about, because that whole time and the way people lived really epitomized what community meant. And I think sometimes we forget that, but then there are these microcosms or these niches where you feel that deep sense of community. And in many ways, like, I'm sure you must feel that with your show. I feel that with this show. It's an amazing thing to be able to have a conversation with a person for half an hour and actually call them a friend afterwards and add them to this group of people that you've connected with. So you get to do that all the time, and you build community in everything that you do. It must be amazing.
Yeah, it is, because I've stayed a fan through this whole time. I'm never jaded. I mean, my signature in the email is internal optimist for a reason. And whenever I get to sit down with artists or producers or authors of music books on my show, it's I love doing it, not because I have a skill set, because I'm not. I'm a fan first and foremost. I'm not a radio guy. I'm surprised as much as anybody else that SiriusXM has given me a show. But I love asking questions. I love finding out why things happened the way that they were, and not going too inside baseball too much. Because again, I'm an idiot when it comes to the making of the music. So I'm just as fascinated with how certain things are happening, or why that title of the song, or what do you do 5 minutes before you get on stage? Because I don't know. And that's the stuff that I think about, when the lights go down and there's like a minute of just darkness in a venue. Where are you? What are you doing? What are you freaking out about? What are you not freaking out? And we also talk about, how they got there. What was that catalyst? Was it family? Was it friends? Who gave them the opportunity to do something like that? And it's just like me, because I answer all those questions a lot about, well, how did you get started? And it's the same story. It's like somebody just gave me an opportunity when I was ready to go. And until then, I just sucked. We were sending out, as a publicist back in like the late 90s, we were sending out faxes, and we have to pick up the phone and call. And I was so cheap. I was so cheap back then. Oh, not I was cheap, but my prices were. I knew what the other publicists were charging, and they would be charging like $1,000 a month, and I'd be charging $100 a month for my services. I was broke, but I loved doing it because I knew that I was making all my mistakes with artists that didn't really deserve to have a publicist. So we were learning at the same time. I was learning how to do publicity. They were learning how to be a band, until we both got better and better and better. And that sweet innocence is exactly why I think Great Balls of Fire will never leave me in terms of nostalgia, because when you're 6 and you don't understand anything, hearing that song was like, I'm all in. I don't know what I'm listening to, but this is the best thing I've ever heard in my entire life. Sorry, Donnie and Marie.
I'm a little bit country, but I'm a little bit rock and roll too. So let me ask you about your identity song, because, I think when we were growing up, there was always this really important piece of the British invasion that kind of, no matter what kind of music you were into, you had to be affected in some way. And you chose this band and this song. What does it say about you?
Yeah, the song I chose is Talk Talk's Life's What You Make It. Not only this the song that I have implored everybody in my life to play at my funeral.
Really?
Yeah, this is the one.
Wow, dude.
Like 15 minutes, and they're going to play this 5-minute song, and then there's going to be 10 minutes of weeping and fainting and passing out, and then everybody's just going to go in the car and have a good time.
Wow, that's a significant plan.
Yeah, right, exactly. So it's funny that you bring up the British invasion, because I think you and I are approximately the same age. Hitting that era of Duran Duran and The Cure and The Cult and Depeche Mode and New Order was a huge influence on my teenage years. Talk Talk was a kind of poor man's Duran Duran in the beginning. They had a couple of albums that were pure pop. And then they came out with an album in 1986 called The Color of Spring. And the record label hated it. They had no idea what to make of this album. They wanted pop hits. The lead singer and leader of the band, Mark Hollis, was very defiant and said that he's going to release what he wants to release. He was using choirs. He used Steve Winwood on a couple of tracks playing keyboards. It was the most anti-commercial album that he could think of, following up It's My Life, which was a huge hit back then. So Life's What You Make It is not only a great song in terms of the lyrics for my identity song, but the fact that Talk Talk was able to do what they wanted to do, regardless of how much they would sell in terms of albums, how much money they would make on the tour, because they stopped touring after this album and they recorded 2 more. Despite the fact that they left millions of dollars on the table, Mark Hollis didn't care. To him, music was art, and nobody was going to tell him what to do with his art. And I couldn't think of a better kind of philosophy for life than people telling you what you can and can't do.
That's awesome. Let's play it. Talk Talk, Life's What You Make It. Differently listening to that song, knowing that this is your parting word song.
Not yet. We still have a lot. We still have a lot of time left to live on this planet. But, yeah.
But like, dude, that's a crazy thing to know, that a song epitomizes the totality of your being, and that you want that to be, your final hurrah. That's an amazing thing to encapsulate in a song.
Yeah, you know what was interesting about the song, that now that I'm kind of listening to it again, and the way that you said that, this song came out in '86, so I was 16, so I was learning how to drive. I was in the middle of high school. You get into the reckless behavior because you think that you're going to live forever, and then you realize one day that you're not. And the the question that every single person faces is, are you okay with death? Are you okay with the fact that you are on this planet for a very short time? And it's funny because when people say, this is so long, and it's like, what? Like, this is the longest thing that we have to offer. So I think once you figure out what you think of the afterlife or religion or where you come from or is there a God, all of those big giant questions that nobody has the answer to. This song was really all about giving me the idea that it doesn't matter what I believe in, and it's okay not to really realize that you don't have the answers, but that the time that you're on this planet now is precious, and that life really truly is what you make it.
It's an amazing thing to be such an eternal optimist and to be able to have such a long career doing what you love. But sometimes things get tough and you need a song that shakes things up, that wakes you up and makes you want to go. So why don't we talk a little bit about, like, especially with the repertoire that you have and the different kinds of upbeat music that you must choose from, you chose this song. Why?
So Wham's Wake Me Up Before You Go Go. So when Wham started a couple of years before this song came out from their album Make It Big, they had an album called Fantastic. And they were two British young guys who looked a little bit rough and tough on the album. They had leather jacket. They did a song called Wham Rap that was like, white boys doing rap? Like, what is this? Because we were used to, like, a little bit of Public Enemy, a little bit of harder stuff. And then they came out with this song, and it was sunshiny. It was beach life. They had Choose Life shirts. They were having neon in their videos, and that people like me and like a lot of my friends who listened to Wham before were like, hey, here's some cool hip guys, and then they come out with Wake Me Up Before You Go Go, and all of a sudden it was like, what and nobody knew what to make of it, but the girls understood. And when this song came out, it was an ability for me to love not only this song and the album Make It Big, but George Michael in general, who to this day I still wear earrings in both of my ears because I thought George Michael looked so amazingly cool with it. So George Michael specifically taught me a lot about life, as weird as that sounds. In 2019, he thought that it was okay to be pretending, because he didn't come out sexually for a number of years. And then when he did come out, he had the opinion that he should be writing an album about how wrong it was and the mistakes he made when he was still kind of in the closet a little bit. So I think the ability to own what your past was and to not be afraid of what the present is and what the future holds, I thought was brilliant in George Michael's later life. This album is just chock filled with hit after hit after hit after hit. And I'm sorry, but if you're in a bad mood and you play this song, and if you're still in a bad mood later on, there's the window, man. I don't know what else to say. Like, go see a doctor, because if nothing cheers you up after this song, I just don't think anything is. But again, it goes back to, I always think of songs not necessarily always as songs and feel good songs. It's just about all the things around, just the sheer gloriness that women felt watching George Michael grow up, and having posters in your locker of Wham, and seeing mass hysteria as a 16-year-old along with Duran Duran and other artists. It was just like, this is cool. This is why music is amazing in your teenage years. So I chose Wake Me Up Before You Go Go, because it's just such a brilliant, bright, upbeat, perfect pop song.
Well, let's share it. Wham.
Till my feet do the same.
Move over, Prozac. We've got Wham.
You know what's so amazing about this song? It's funny because Andrew Ridgeley, who is half of Wham, came out with a book. And, Andrew Ridgeley, he was a little bit of the butt of the jokes, and because certain people would say that he didn't do anything. And they'll say the same thing about somebody like Ringo Starr from the Beatles. It's like he wasn't even the best drummer in the band. And I worked with Ringo for like a decade. And, it goes back to what you and we were talking about teaching or following your dreams. You might not get to be a George Michael. You may not get to be a Paul McCartney. But without Ringo Starr, the Beatles are not the Beatles. The Beatles may not even survive longer than a year and a half. You need somebody like Ringo Starr to be able to not only play the drums well and your instrument well, but just be humorous and light, because there is a tornado of hysteria around those four guys for 10 years. Not everybody can be George Michael. Sometimes you have to be Andrew Ridgeley, but you still get to tour the world and you still get a lot of money in your bank account and get to drive cars and do what you do. And it's a really good thought process that, not everybody gets to play first base for the New York Yankees. There are people who are backup. There are people who are bullpen coaches, and not everybody gets to teach where they want to teach at a school where they want to teach. Sometimes you have to be a supply teacher in order to just keep your foot in the door. But those moments that you're teaching in that classroom for those 45 minutes, you have every opportunity to change and blow somebody's life. I don't want to go off on a tangent, but Disney has in the marketing and PR department, they've invented what's called the 5-second rule. And it is the philosophy that everybody at Disney has the ability within 5 seconds to change somebody's life. So everybody at Disney walks around with like literally a $20 bill in their pocket, because if they see a kid who dropped an ice cream cone on the ground, they quickly move in and go buy another one, changing that kid's life. It's why they put name tags on birthday girls or boys or men and women, and all day long you're like, happy birthday, Eric, happy birthday, and you're like, how do they know my name? It's like, there's the name tag. So that 5-second mind blow is what I teach the people in music as well, that the ability that you could say thank you to a fan, you can say thank you to a mentor, to a hero. It's funny, just yesterday I posted on Twitter, I posted that, tonight, thank a musician for what they do, because your life would be a living hell without music. Just for giggles, just to see, 6,000 responses later, I'm seeing people literally around the world thank, Bon Jovi and Paul McCartney and the small local band, and all of those artists are retweeting it. 5 seconds it takes somebody to say thank you, to say please, to say I'm sorry, to teach somebody something that they're looking for, to not be mean. All of those things, are just what makes this world amazing. And each of those 3 songs that I chose, even though that they're all different in terms of the thread, it just takes 5 seconds for me to realize that, yep, this is completely changing my life.
That is just wild. And I think it's such a wonderful point for educators that we have these wonderful opportunities in our everyday lives to really make a difference. And you have made a difference in so many lives. So I'm just going to name drop a little bit some of your clients, like Bob Geldof, Randy Bachman, The Cult, Merle Haggard, Ringo Starr, Slash, The Wiggles, Bush, Steve Earle, Snoop Dogg, Smashing Pumpkins, Ray Charles, Little Steven, Sinead O'Connor, Sesame Street, among hundreds of others in the 25 years you've been in the music industry. Thank you so much for coming on the Personal Playlist podcast. Is there anything you want to add? Oh, no, we have to tell people how to find you, even though you're like out there.
Oh, yeah.
Tell people how to find you.
Yeah, they can find me on Twitter and Facebook at that Eric Alper, or visit the website anytime at thatericalper.com. And thank you for doing this podcast. This is, this is just so cool. The fact that you do this, that, you're changing lives with every single listen, and everybody's out there to to make their lives better. And it's so good to know that not only I'm sure that you're learning off of people that's not me, but the ability that people are listening in to you all the time, learning something new. And we've never lived in a greater time for information and education. And I'm just so happy that podcasts are out there, because, you know, without it, you and I are probably still stuck in a room somewhere going, how come nobody's talking to me?
But it's a perfect example of the connections we can make with each other and with people all around the world. And I really appreciate the messaging that you shared. I loved hearing your love of music and the way that you like the story behind the music and some of those peeled back layers of onion that often people don't ask about the music. That's probably what's made you essentially curious perpetually and an avid musicologist. Is that what you call you?
Yeah, without a degree, but I'll take it though.
A degree from life, living the music. Eric Alper, thank you so much for coming out.
Thanks so much, Noah. I appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
Okay, have a fantastic day.
You too.
Thank you for joining us on the P3, the Personal Playlist Podcast. I'm Noah Daniel. This is Voice Ed Radio, and I hope you have a fantastic day.